Welcome back, everybody. I hope you're all fantastic. I first got my Axe FX 3 in August of 2018. In August of 2019, I did a video that I called 1 Year with the Axe FX 3, and I meant to do a video in August of 2020. Like most things in 2020, things did not go according to plan, so here we are, like 5 months late. So let's call it 2.5 years with the Axe FX 3. What I want to do is just go over some of the features that have been added in the 1.5 years since I did a firmware overview. So we're jumping off at around firmware 11 all the way through to firmware 15, and I just want to talk about my favorite things that have been added to what is easily my favorite piece of guitar gear ever. I play this thing every single day, and even though in 2020 I did so few gigs compared to previous years, I played guitar so much at home. I think I kind of rediscovered that guitar is not only something that I'm lucky enough to do for a living, it's my main hobby as well. And on both fronts, from kind of like a working musician standpoint and from a hobbyist who just loves playing around with tones, the Axe FX 3 scratches all my itches, and it's why it's the centerpiece of my studio at home. I'm playing my PRS Custom 24 at the moment, straight into the Axe 3, no post-processing. And let's start with one of my favorite additions. I think this was added in firmware, I can't even remember which firmware it was added in, but it's a 59 bass guy jump, and I love this thing for that kind of gritty edge of breakup thing, especially on the parallel modes of this guitar. Add some squish in front with the updated compressor block, which was updated in, I've got my notes down here, I think it was firmware 12. Lots of stuff got updated in firmware 12, including the phaser and the flanger. But my favorite compressor now in here is this JFET compressor, basically an 1176 style vibe, or think of the Origin Effects Cali 76 pedal. This is how I have it set up on just about everything. When you put it in front of this amp or just about any kind of edge of breakup or clean out, you get this. That's an addictive sound right there. I am using the London plate reverb on the ultra high quality mode. The ultra high quality mode was added in a reverb block update. There's also an economy mode. So on the ultra high reverb, you can see the CPU is like somewhere between 55 and 60%. I'm going to change it over to economy. It will save a whole bunch of CPU, which I don't really need to do. There's plenty of headroom in this particular preset, but the change in quality isn't really that noticeable. And from rereading the release notes, the big difference is in the ultra high quality mode, it gives you some extra kind of depth and time in the modulation of the reverb. So if you don't use modulated reverb, you probably won't really notice that difference. There's definitely a difference between the economy and the ultra high, but not so much between the economy and the normal mode. So that's a really nice addition. I just basically leave it on ultra high because, you know, why wouldn't you if you've got the headroom in there? So that's a little reverb update. The what else has been updated? So many blocks, like I said before. The drive block got an update in firmware 13, and there's loads of new drive types. Probably my favorite is this compulsion distortion. So in front of this gritty amp and with the JFET compressor, this is really, really sweet. I'll also add in a new delay type that was added, the stereo mind guy. So let's kick in this compulsion distortion. I'll go to the bridge pickup here. Beautiful stuff. I love the sound of that Mind Guy in there as well. Same thing, JFET compressor, stacking it with the drives. You can stack 2 compressors, you can stack multiple drives. A couple of the other drives that I'm enjoying in here are, let's actually turn the compressor off for this. The Toner Kings is really nice as well. That one gets nasty. What have I got on channel C? I've got the fuzz face. I think the fuzzes sound really good. You know, a lot of people talk about the limitations of digital modeling being around the like impedance of, you know, authentic fuzz circuits. But personally, I like really disgusting sounding fuzzes. So when I put a fuzz on, I just want it to have a really, really rude kind of character. And the face fuzz does that for me. Your mileage may vary. That's into a clean amp. If I take one of the other new amp models, this Plexi 50 watt 6CA7, let's just hear that. I might turn the delay off and then we'll kick the fuzz in front of that. It sounds pretty wild. DS1, I actually really like the DS1 mod. That's super, super sweet. Even crazier is if you take something like the USA Lead mid-gain, which is my favorite amp in the Axe FX3 and the FM3, and then you put something like the DS1 on top, it's just this like, you know, I think I referred to it as like cornstarch for your tone. It just thickens it up no matter what. You couldn't tell by my facial expressions. I'm enjoying all of this. Let's go back to that 50 watt Plexi though, because I want to show off the phaser and flanger updates. So basically a complete overhaul in here. Plenty of new models, but stuff like the Stripe 90 based on the EVH signature Phase 90 kind of does the trick. The Flanger as well has several new modes. Let's go to another new amp model, the Archean Bright, so the PRS Archon model, and I'll show this off. I was able to pretty closely recreate the infamous symphonic preset from the SPX 90 rack unit with the new flanger block using this digital stereo mode. I'll show you what that does, but first let's hear the Archean. That's stunning. If I go back to some kind of cleanish sound, I also really like the Deluxe Mystery based around the Electro Harmonix Electric Mistress. Let's hear this with the Stereo Mind Guy. So we got the Memory Man and the Deluxe Electric Mistress. Alrighty, that is what's going on With those blocks, the multi-tap delay has to be one of my favorite effects blocks ever. And this got some kind of welcome additions where the EQ section has been upgraded and expanded. So there's a semi-parametric in there now. You can adjust the low and the high filter slopes, just like in the delay block. The chorus has a master chorus. Oh, it's over here. So one thing I love to do with this is to create like a quad chorus using the 4 delay voices, and having instant access to master rate and depth is really handy. That's awesome in there. Similarly, you can attach modifiers to the level controls in here as well. This particular delay though is one that I got off the Fractal forum, and it's emulating the Lexicon pan delays. I think this one here is probably emulating the circular delays. So let's go back to that Archon and let's have a play around with these multi-taps. This is lush, this is beautiful. Entire modifiers system has kind of opened up a little bit more, where you can assign modifiers to even more parameters than you could before. For example, if you wanted to attach, the pitch follower to the graphic EQ, you can now do that, which you couldn't before. Lots of different parameters which weren't available to have modifier control now have modifier control. That sounded way more difficult than it had to be. The other thing that I like as well is you can attach multiple modifier sources to a parameter. So for example, if you wanted to have 2 wah pedals, one at the front of the stage for when you walk out and do your amazing guitar solo, and one near your mic stand so you can play all your kind of funky stuff with a wah, you could set that up really easily using the onboard modifiers, which is really, really nice. There's lots of other creative uses for that. I won't get into it too much here. I am meaning to do, and I've been meaning to do a video on that for quite a while. So what haven't we looked at yet? The pitch block got an update, actually. This is great if you want to use a virtual capo and just basically move the pitch of your guitar up and down. For example, are we still on the mighty Archon? I think we are. Let's do this. Let's turn off the input boost in the amp block. I'm going to bring up the precision drive for this one so we can hear that. I normally leave the drive quite low. Crank the level up. Let's just have a listen to it with it off, and then with it on, it's kind of secret sauce for high gain. Absolute brutality, even though, what do I have on here? It's still got the London plate reverb on there. Maybe that's not the most appropriate thing for a high gain tone, but we'll roll with it. We will survive for now. So that's the precision drive. That was asked for a long time. It's finally in there. It sounds fantastic. But let's do this. Let's tune our guitars. I'm in drop D. Let's go down to drop B, and I'm going to use a virtual capo. You can see I've set the detector source to input 1, and this does it all kind of really effortlessly, which is nice. So a bit of drop D, then a bit of drop B. Unreal. That's so much fun. It means I can't really justify the need to get, a big 7-string or a baritone or something like that. This scratches that occasional itch for me, even though I'm sure at some point I am going to get one or both of those kind of guitars. I really should. But the pitch block for drop tuning stuff is phenomenal. Let's again go back to something kind of clean. I'll go to this 59 bass guy, and one little trick I like is using the virtual capo, set it to 12 semitones of shift, but set the mix to like 15%, and you can kind of get a little bit of a 12-string vibe, especially if you pair it with something like a phaser. Let's go back to the old Stripe 90. Have a listen to this. It's really nice for that subtle stuff right there. Wow, there's so much to cover. I still feel like I'm leaving things out. But one other thing is, let's go to, say, the reverb block. We now have a stack function and a hold function. So if you like building big ambient pads, let's maybe change this London plate to, I don't know, the cirrocumulus reverb, and let's turn stack on. And this is a really, really nice way to just kind of build up big ambient reverbs, or if you attach it to the the hold function, you can do the kind of freeze thing as well. But you could do that before, but the stack mode is new. You get the idea there anyway. And again, with that dual modifier ability, you could attach control switches on your FC pedal to toggle between the stack and the hold function and do some things like that while having both of your hands free. Very, very nice stuff indeed. So there's the stack function. I got to look down at my notes because I'm forgetting a lot of things. In firmware, I think it was 15, there were a bunch of routing options added as well. So if you go to Tools and you go to Setup, you can see here with the audio, you can set input 1, 2, 3, or 4 to either be an analog source or to be a digital source. If you've been keeping up with the videos I've been doing with vintage rack units, I've been using this a lot to connect them in their own effects loops so that I don't have to go through the sometimes crusty old analog to digital converters on those units. I can use the SPDIF in feature and get that happening. So that's fantastic. What else was going on here? I feel like there was something else I had to mention. The digital routing is really, really cool though. Another kind of neat little feature as well, if we go back to, say, the amp block, is I'm going to use the boogie again to demonstrate this one. So if you go to the power amp section, there's this parameter called transformer drive, which was updated in the most recent firmware. I better turn some of these things off. I'm also going to turn the reverb off for this one as well. I like just giving that a bit of a kick to get a little bit more grind out of the low end. So I might just turn the fat switch on this one off so it's a little bit more rhythm guitar appropriate. And where are we? Transformer drive. I'll go from 1 to 2. Pretty subtle, there's definitely a feel thing going on there. But I've kind of saved the biggest thing for last, and this one came out not long after I did my 1-year review video all the way back in firmware 11. It's the speaker impedance modeling. So previously, on the speaker page right here, you basically just had this set of parameters here, but now there's higher order speaker impedance modeling. And I find this has a massive effect on the kind of general feel of what you're using. At the moment, I'm using a 4x12 Recto straight impulse. I'm going to change that over to the 5153 model. Especially if you're playing with high gain, especially if you're doing a bunch of palm muted stuff, these speaker impedance curves are really, really awesome. they're probably the one thing in all of the amp modeling updates since I got my unit that I feel has really, really made a kind of quantum leap with the Axe-Fx 3, and they're on the FM3 as well. Whether you're using stuff like the kind of Fendery style amps, you know, you can have these authentic cabinet impedance selections, or you can go for something different. For example, if I use like a 1/8 impedance curve with this, or I could use a 4/12 recto with it. I don't have to stick to the authentic choices. That one's giving me a whole lot more thump out of my monitors at the moment. So a little bit more of that amp in the room vibe going on there. So many features. Oh, I didn't get to talk about the trem. There's an optical tremolo in here as well, which sounds lovely. It sounds like this. I think that Deluxe Spring Reverb is new in there as well. So many things to go over, not to mention things like extra usability features on the FC controllers and UI, things like that. Just, you know, if you went through all of these, and I'm sure, you know, you added up the cost of buying all these things individually and you think of them as the value added to your Axe-Fx 3, it's ridiculously impressive, let alone the fact that it all just sounds so good. And I think the main thing that I noticed with all of these firmware updates and improvements is it just gets quicker and easier to dial in usable tones. Not that the tones weren't usable on any of the previous firmwares. When I did my 1-year review, if firmware development had stopped there, it still would have sounded phenomenal. But with the improved speaker impedance modeling, some of the amp updates, just all the extra options in things like the flanger, the phaser, the delay, the compressor, the reverb, it makes it really, really easy and effortless for us as guitar players to get into a zone where we're really enjoying what we're hearing. The tones work in a musical context, which is really, really good if you're a working musician, or if you're just noodling around at home and you're just trying to have fun and maybe take your mind off kind of the world around you, it's quick to get into that zone as well. So even though there are more options, I just kind of find that those options are more readily inspiring and what's the word I'm looking for? Well, they're just kind of more upfront and in your face. I really like it. It's my favorite piece of gear ever. Like I said in my last review, it's probably not for everybody though, and that's totally fine. You know, just because you have a piece of gear that might be your favorite piece of gear doesn't mean that my opinion about my favorite piece of gear invalidates your piece of gear and vice versa. I mean, it's just such a good time to be a guitar player, whether you're a home hobbyist, whether you're a songwriter, whether you're an aspiring rock star. Just, you know, get on with the job and get into those glorious, glorious sounds. Thanks so much for watching the video. I'll see you all next time.